Good evening and welcome to the book launch of Dauntless Courage by David Carroll. It's a wonderful evening and we hope you'll enjoy the presentation. I'm going to hand over to Damien Tiernan very shortly and there's going to be a bit of a chat, so we hope you'll stick around for all of that. It's very fitting that tonight, at this very hour, on this very date, there was a rescue taking place 50 years ago just off Hook Head. It ended up being called the Glen Malure tragedy because tragically Pat Barry from Slade was lost, but 3 of the crew on the Glen Malure were saved. The wheelhouse had been blown off, the nets and the mast, and Stephen Whittle, who was the coxswain on the night, was decorated. He got a silver medal for gallantry for his services and his bravery, and all the crew were also decorated. So it is really fitting that tonight this takes place. Sadly, Stephen passed away on October the 17th, and I know they had a guard of honour here at the lifeboat station and he's sadly missed, and our condolences to his family. But it's a night for celebration as well, because this book, written by David Carroll, is just wonderful. He has got pictures from everywhere in it. He's got pictures that you've never seen before if you think you've seen all the pictures of the Dunmore East or of the lifeboat. It's a wonderful book and it celebrates the very start of the lifeboat here in Dunmore East in 1884 right up to the present day, and right beside me here of course is the Elizabeth and Ronald. So we hope you enjoy the evening, and right now I'll pass over to Damien Tiernan.
Jeff, thank you very much for that. Hello and welcome to what promises to be an excellent evening of discussion and debate. Welcome to a unique book launch of a fabulous publication for a truly amazing organisation. My name is Damien Tiernan. I'm the main news and current affairs presenter on Waterford Local Radio. For the past 2 decades or more, I've been reporting on many inspiring, numerous and courageous search and rescue operations by the RNLI, many of which were based around the Waterford and Wexford coasts, and a lot of whom were launched from Dunmore East. I mentioned the word courageous, and that's the word I think that we're going to, I suppose, thematically spread throughout this discussion. The word courage, it means so much to so many. It is a word that imbues itself in one of the oldest, I suppose, and noblest forms of community service. That's the work of the lifeboat men and women. Now, I'm honoured for personal reasons as well to be involved in this launch tonight. It's a superb publication. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Before we do that, and before I introduce the panel, I am going to go over briefly to Grace O'Sullivan, who is a lifelong supporter of the RNLI, and particularly the Dunmore East RNLI. And Grace O'Sullivan, MEP, had a few words of well wishes for us tonight on this launch.
David, I want to wish you the very best of luck this evening with the launch of your great book. I also want to wish the best of luck to Neville and the representatives from the RNLI who will be speaking with Damien Tiernan this evening. Damien and I share a great passion for the sea, and also I know we share a passion for the importance of the work of the RNLI, and I know you'll be in the best of hands. Regarding my own association with the sea, I'm the spokesperson for the Green Party on Marine, and I'm also a coordinator in the European Parliament on the Fisheries Committee. I've spent 20 years of my life at sea, and I'm also a former lifeguard and a surfer, so the sea is very much part of my blood. I love supporting the work of the RNLI, and you'll see a picture of myself and Neville in the book when we were involved in a fundraising swim in Dunmore East some years ago. And I'm glad to say you won't see a picture of me trying to toss the welly to fundraise, because I was so useless I made a right show of myself. So as a former member of the Tramore RNLI, I have to say I have huge appreciation for the courage of the RNLI members, and they put themselves in great danger at times in order to save lives at sea. And I believe we owe the crew members and all of the support around the RNLI a huge debt of gratitude. I would ask you to support this event, to buy David's book or to donate to the RNLI. And given that it's very close to Christmas, you might buy some merchandise. I know at home, in my family home, we always had RNLI Christmas cards as we went into the Christmas period. So the RNLI is very close to my heart, and I know this Christmas I will be setting aside time, which I know I'm going to enjoy greatly, to read Dauntless Courage and enjoy every word in the book. Thank you, David.
Grace, thank you very much for that. Some lovely words there. Now we're going to go straight into our panel discussion with author David Carroll, Brendan Dunn and Neville Murphy. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're going to have a great discussion tonight about this fabulous publication, Dauntless Courage. I'm going to just mention the word courage, and I'm going to talk about, I suppose, the history a little bit at the start. David Carroll, well done on the publication. I'm going to talk about the ins and outs of that and how you did that and compiled it over 2 years of marvellous work in a little while. But talk to me about times before a lifeboat station and a lifeboat crew and lifeboats existed in Waterford, or in particular off Dunmore East. Like, how treacherous was it without a lifeboat?
Hi, Damien. Yeah, the area from the Hook on the Wexford coast was known as the graveyard of 1,000 ships. So that kind of gives you an idea how dangerous that stretch of water is, and Waterford Harbour. And in 1862, on one occasion, on one particular storm in January of 1862, no less than 10 ships were lost in Waterford Harbour. So that gives you an idea of what things were like. And it was that storm which I think was a sort of the genesis of the lifeboat coming a number of years later, because Billy Dunphy from Brownstown discovered a newspaper cutting of a letter from Sir Robert Paul writing and pleading for a lifeboat arising from that storm. That was in 1862. And in 1884, and it was 22 years later, but a lifeboat arrived in Dunmore. Now, there had been one stationed in Duncannon prior to that. So it was an area crying out for a lifeboat because of the number of shipwrecks and tragedies that happened. That people looking, the nearest thing to a lifeboat was Her Majesty's Coast Guard. And in the early years, in 1835, 37 and 1840, silver medals were awarded to members of the Her Majesty's Coast Guard for saving lives from shipwrecks. So there was a tradition of lives being saved before the lifeboat came.
Okay, let me pause you for 1 second there, David, because I'm going to come back to you in a minute regarding specific instances that jump out of the pages from this book. I want to go to Brendan for a second, if that's okay. Brendan, talk to me about your involvement in the lifeboat going back decades, and also the history that David is talking about. How much does one, as a child, as a teenager, growing up in a coastal fishing community, how much do you take on board on a personal level as you are getting involved in a lifeboat crew? Because this goes to the heart of it, what David is talking about, and tying it in with your idea as a volunteer.
Well, I suppose growing up, it's part of what you are living in Dunmore East. You saw it all around you in the families, and in our own family, we had quite a lot of links going back quite a long time. My own grandfather was a crewman, and in various parts of the family, there was various other links. So it was always conscious of the lifeboat. And when the Maroons went off in particular, the whole area and everybody knew that the lifeboat was going out. So there was huge interest to see what was happening. You were also conscious of the characters and people that had went before when you were growing up. You'd heard of Paddy Billy Power and so forth, going further back, and you knew of the stories of the great sailing ships that were lost in the harbour. So it was all part of the heritage that you unknowingly grew up with. It was what you thought was the normal situation in terms of saving lives at sea and all of that. So it was very natural to drift towards that, to join the lifeboat. And it was always, as I say, in the family, and many families in the area and in the village in particular. And you always followed in that line. You wanted to contribute, and you basically took it from there, you know. And as David said, in relation to the heritage of the village, it's I gave a talk a couple of years ago in relation to the history of the lifeboat, and it was amazing in terms of the discovery of the original minute books and the heritage and the returns of service and all of that. And at the time, I was afraid that would be lost. And I think I met David at that talk, and I thought then, and subsequently he met Andrew Doherty, and further discussions, that David was an absolutely ideal person to write about that heritage, in terms of they had the span of knowledge and experience going back, having growing up in the village, and was able to translate that into an excellent book, covering right back, as he spoke earlier there, from the early 1800s to the present day, which is quite an achievement because the research wasn't coherent. It took a lot of visiting and meeting people and talking to people, and people were very, very generous with their time in terms of photographs and all of that. So all of that was very much conscious in terms of it. We were afraid that a lot of it would be lost.
Let me follow on that then with Neville. Neville, the book brings alive exactly what David and Brendan are talking about, the families, the history, the tradition, because it's very easy for a book to become an academic tome which ordinary people can't relate to. From your perspective, how much is reflected in the book in terms of your own life and your idea of volunteerism and the idea of, again, courage, the idea of going out there? Because one can get highfalutin about this, but it comes down to just, yeah, it's something I feel I should do, and it's something I feel I want to do.
Yeah, I suppose my experience in lifeboat, I suppose, began as a child walking around West Cork in Baltimore and listening, as Brendan mentioned earlier, to the Maroons, and I think that's when I first knew of the Iron Lion lifeboats. After that, then it was obviously my work as in the helicopter with Rescue 107 and so on. And for years, I watched the work of the Iron Lion, and I think that drew me in. And, you know, recognizing the courage. And I do think that every single person that goes out on a lifeboat has huge amount of courage, and it takes courage to go out there. And one thing that really stuck out to me going through the process of this book was probably one of the most recent shouts we had was the Lily Bee off of Hookhead, and a lot of people are aware of that one because it made the media. And that aspect is interesting as well because, you know, it was in daytime, there was photographs, there was video footage, so everybody knew really what we did out there and the conditions that we're in. The stories that have been told by David and Brendan in this book, you know, are the unseen stories, and I think they deserve to be told. I mean, there we were off the hook in horrendous conditions, in our lovely Trent class lifeboat with seat belts, with lovely soft seats, indoors, and with 2 propellers and 2 big engines, you know. So, you know, you look back to one of the biggest incidents that's written in the book, I think is probably the Mexico off the Wexford coast 160 years ago, in, you could probably say, similar conditions. And, you know, I compare us going out in these conditions in our high class, top of the range Trent lifeboat, and these guys rowed out in these conditions. It's just hard to comprehend. And you talk about courage, I think every lifeboat crew has courage, but these guys, it's bravery, it's courage, it's beyond belief, and I think it's wonderfully told in this book. And fair play to David for getting the words in the book and these stories told. It's fantastic.
You're 100% right on that. And David, from reading the different vignettes, the different chapters, the different experiences in the book, you seem to try and tie this together. And like, for example, the Henry Dodd era was phenomenal, what was achieved during that era, wasn't it? We're talking about 1884 to 1911, something exactly just following on from what Neville was referencing there, the differences in how maritime safety matters were applied, and the lack of basic things that we'd see now as necessities for going out. You know, these were mad lads, weren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, the life jackets they wore were horrendous, just made from cork, and I don't think they were really life jackets. They were just almost pretend. And sadly, one of them was lost in 1893. That was Philip Boucher, and we decided to dedicate the book in his memory. He was the only person ever lost from a Dunmore lifeboat, which says an awful lot for, you know, how safety conscious they have been and over the years. But sadly, Philip was lost, and we were delighted to be able to dedicate the book in his memory, and his members of his family became involved, and they've, as you may have seen, written a small piece for the book, and we have a chapter dedicated to Philip in the book. So that was during the Henry Dodd era. And now, funny enough, when Philip was lost, it wasn't actually the Henry Dodd, it was a relief lifeboat. And I think that might have been a very big factor in the loss, because I would imagine that the crew weren't used to handling the new boat. Probably in heavy weather, they didn't know how to handle her. And it was an inexperienced crew as well, so there was a lot of factors. And sadly, Philip was lost.
David, your experience of writing about the RNLI, and you're an acclaimed author, and you've written a number of publications. Like, how important was it for you as an author to reflect and represent that courageous aspect of community service, which is not seen as courageous by so many of the volunteers? It's seen as a normal thing to do. We're just going out and doing what we feel we should be doing.
Okay, well, what we say throughout the book, I think it's repeated several times, is it's ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And that theme, I think, goes right throughout the book. It's mentioned on several occasions. When I set out to write the book, the first thing I did was I tried to get as many other books from lifeboat stations, similar histories, and read as many as I could, or scanned through them. I didn't read them from cover to cover, but I saw how they were set out. Some were very academic, as you mentioned earlier, lots of statistics, and tough enough to read unless you were from that area, from that, with a connection to the station. But the one that I liked the most was one by a maritime writer from County Wexford called John Power, and he wrote about the Kilmore Quay lifeboat. And I liked the style he used. He did little cameos, little episodes, very much in the style of Andrew Doherty. And that's the sort of style I tried to adopt, and I hope it was successful.
Brendan, talk to me about families. Again, I don't want you to go naming all the families, because we're going to leave out some families, but we talk about Stephen Whittle, we talk about different families over the years, so many different powers in Dunmore, and many different, the Glodies, and so many different others. But the idea that father, son, and daughter now as well helps out and gets involved, and it becomes again part of your life. And again, this is reflected in the different episodes of rescues that are referenced in the book.
Yeah, as I said, it was always a part of the families, and many of the families you'll see the names coming through, as you mentioned, the Glodies, Murphy, Whittles, Powers, all of those. And it was just something, as I said earlier, that was a natural follow-on to do in terms of the lifeboat. And as the village is changing now, there's new people coming in and joining the lifeboat, and so you're going to have an extended area on that in terms of participation right across the board. And I suppose it just shows the commitment in the locality from the community, because it's not just one or two individuals, it's a complete community effort. likewise, say in the fundraising branch or the ops team and all of that, you've got a complete community effort in that, again, with many families' names cropping up and so forth. And as you mentioned there about the time going back, if you take Francis Lodi, Francis's family would have been involved quite a bit, and likewise in the maritime side of things, and with the pilotage on the Shanoon, and Francis would have followed in onto the lifeboat quite naturally in terms of participation as well. And again, being the first female all-weather lifeboat lady in the country, I think either between here and Britain, it was quite an achievement. But again, in the village itself, that was seen as a natural progression because that's what people did. You contributed as best you could, and thing always developed from there. So it's always good to see that sort of change taking place. And
with that then in mind as well, those that go to sea are an integral part of the lifeboat operation level, but behind that then there are teams of people, and that's reflected in what David has captured here, the different instances that you would have been involved in, for example, the Père Charles and different matters where you had so many different teams and volunteers getting involved behind the scenes. Again, David will be talking about this, and we can thank different groups of people that are involved, but those that provide that support for ye out on the water are as important as many other aspects. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. And you have so many, and that's including our own families at home. I mean, every time any of us answer the bleeper and answer the call, we're leaving our wife and children behind us, our partners, you know, so there's that aspect of it. We have a fantastic fundraising branch down in the station, and you know, anytime there's any of these, like you mentioned, the Père Charles, you know, anytime there's a major search on, the station fills up below with our fundraising people down there, and they set up shop in there. They have tea, they have sandwiches for families of the people that we're looking for. You know, this kind of community effort is in there, and it's absolutely fantastic. And we've crew change, and you know, that's the other thing about what we're saying about, you know, the future of the lifeboat is the next thing as well. And you notice that in the turnaround of crew, I suppose even the most recent shouts we've been out on, I've noticed, you know, myself, there's younger crew than me now these days, which it's fantastic to see, you know, and that's what we want. And I look at Brendan here tonight. Brendan is our most seasoned campaigner on our lifeboat. I mean, I think 36 years of service is outstanding, and that's just, it's amazing, you know. And for young fellas, I mean, in the recent shows, you've guys that are out on their first and second and third shows. It's fantastic to have the likes of Brendan on board with those guys. And these are the future, and these are the guys that are going to take over from us, you know, and we need that. We need the turnaround. So we're always looking for people as well, and looking for volunteers. So the door is always open, is what I'd say as well, David.
Yeah, he's looking fresh on it, isn't he? Like, I know he's only 46. He went on the lifeboat when he was 10. You know, fair play to him. Fair play to you, Brendan. Good. You're looking fresher than I am, huh? Jesus, that's great. Brendan, I'm going to come back to you in a second. David, what's captured in the book as well is photographs and paintings. And again, we'll talk about and we'll praise DV printing, the printing press, and how this printing was done. But the clarity of the pictures and photographs, and how a face can say so much, and then also the beautiful paintings and the beautiful capturing of different images was very important to tell that story within the text, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And for that we have to really thank all our sponsors, because originally the book was a sort of a heritage project, and we hope that maybe at the end of the day a small check might be paid over to the RNLI, and we were going down the route of looking for grants to maybe put a deposit on the printing, and that just didn't happen. So the alternative then was to go for full proper sponsorship, and we were just coming into the COVID period, and it really looked, you know, didn't look great, but it was marvellous, the response we got, and that was thanks very much to all the very generous sponsors, but also to the committee in Dunmore who worked so hard coordinating that and promoting it. And it was because of the generous sponsorship we got then, we were able to go for a really first-class book with Bill Deavy and DVF Printing and Graphic Solutions. And that's why we have such wonderful clarity on the photographs and all the paintings. And we like to thank all the people who donated those to us. We started very modestly and it just built up. And then we had Neville's wonderful portfolio of photographs in the last 15 to 20 years for the latter period of the book. That was wonderful to get as well. And we got some wonderful old photographs donated by some people who prefer to remain anonymous. So all in all, we had a great response, and that has really enhanced the book and brought some of the stories really to life.
Brendan, 36 years approximately. 1984 was the centenary year of the RNLI at Dunmore East, and around that time is when you would have joined. And then we had 85, a sad Christmas at the Hook Peninsula. And I'm looking at different pictures here and the shortest distance undertaken for a lifeboat service in 88. There's so many different stories told within this. Is there anything that stands out for you over those years? Any particular personal sort of memories? And it's still an ongoing, it's still alive for you, obviously. It's still an ongoing job for you. Is there anything that stands out in those early years in particular that, I suppose, typified the importance of the lifeboat?
We always remember the big shouts and all of that, and the general shouts as well. But the thing that always stood out for me was the people, and in terms of the crews and of the boats, and then on shore in terms of the support of the crews, but also the families that you were looking to help. It was the most difficult for those families, and we were a conduit for them to try and help them locate their loved ones at sea. And that was always something that you never forgot, because you always wanted to be able to bring somebody back. And the hardest thing, I think John Welch alluded to it in one comment he made, that you always remember the ones you don't rescue. And it's something that you don't forget. So that would stick out for me. Like the seas and the shouts, and they're all part and parcel of it, whether they're big seas or calm seas or whatever, and all of that. But on the boat itself, then you remember the people, how a crew comes together from very diverse backgrounds and jobs and all of that, and operate as a crew to do one purpose only, and that is to save somebody's life at sea. And that is a big commitment, and you've got to admire that when you see it in people. Like when I first joined, my first exercise, just as a preliminary exercise, was actually with Stephen Whittle, and I just even remember still getting the feel of the commitment. Like, it was an exercise, but it was still, you knew you were possibly stepping into something that was far bigger than yourself or far bigger than anything else. And that has continued right through. So when you see people coming into the lifeboat, you help them and work with them and be patient with them, because you know what's ahead of them, and what you want them to be able to do is to contribute on that. So for me, it's really the people right through, whether, again, as I say, whether it's the crews or whether on shore, but particularly you remember families that you've met over the time, and sometimes you continue to meet the relations of people. It's always great when you bring someone back ashore, whether you tow a boat in or you save somebody from the water and bring it in on the lifeboat. But it's harder for everybody when if your search is not successful, or it's a tragic end in the search. So those things stick with me more. As I say, the sea is the sea, and you've got to respect the sea, and you've no control over that other than just be careful and have your faith in your coxswain and all of that, which is a tremendous thing.
There's probably only two professions in the world, maybe, whether it be mining and maybe fishing, where people may not come back after going out to do a day's work. If a tragedy happens, God forbid, on a farm, you'll find the body, please God, and whatever the case may be. But mining and maybe fishing. And Neville, that idea, that importance of getting a body back, and also, again, the courage to face relatives as well. Again, that's the word we're using again today, courage. To face relatives and to say to them that you did your best. Because Talk to me, Neville, about exactly what Brendan has touched on there, the idea of the crew working together and that teamwork, that integral teamwork, that you depend so much on each other. And that's so, so important, isn't it?
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. I mean, I suppose it all starts with training. I suppose at the end of the day, you know, we have to train together as a team and work as a team, and you know, we all have to get on and understand each other. And I suppose, you know, the conditions, and Brendan mentioned the weather conditions earlier, and I suppose weather conditions at time can reduce your communications on deck of a boat, and you have your coxswain up top trying to, you know, pass instructions to his crew, and the wind is howling in your ears and you can't really hear very much, and sometimes it becomes the nod and the wink, and that's how you get your instructions, and you have to understand what your coxswain is looking for and what he needs you to do on the deck. And you know, you really become, as we often refer to ourselves, I suppose, in the RNLI, and the RNLI as a whole is our little family, you know, and we're all just one big family, really. And that's it. We all fall out with each other, and you know, we all get back in with each other again. That's all a part and parcel of it. But I think, you know, when you do get the serious call, everybody switches on to that, and we take it very seriously. And like Brendan said earlier, the hardest part, certainly for me as well, is the ones that you don't get back. That's the hardest part, you know. And it's a cruel sea, and it's unforgiving out there. And we have to train hard to protect ourselves to be out there in the first place. But coming home from a search, coming home from, you know, it's that feeling we haven't succeeded. We have failed in our mission if we come home without something. That's the hardest part of the whole operation, I think, you know.
And with that leads me on very nicely, David, to the next section I want to talk about, the boats themselves and the engineers that work behind the scenes that Brendan and Neville have referenced, that keep the boats working and keep them functioning for so many years. For example, in 1970, having served Dunmore East with distinction for 30 years, the Annie Blanche Smith era came to an end in the autumn of 1970. Like, the idea of a vessel serving in awful seas, in difficult conditions for 30 years, that was only possible because of the work of the crews behind the scenes and the care and attention given by the crews to the vessels. And that goes through the book from the very start, David, doesn't it?
It does indeed. It's been wonderful mechanics over the years, and sometimes they don't get probably the credit that's really due to them. The coxswains do by and large get credit. The people who maintain the boats, keep them in pristine condition, always have them ready to put to sea. Sometimes might be a little bit. We've tried to address that in the book, and we dedicated one section to a number of mechanics over the years. The other thing to remember is, like, the RNLI would boats go to boat yards and are, you know, overhauled and refitted, so the boats are kept in very good condition, as well as locally by the RNLI. But 30 years was a really tremendous service from the Annie Blanche Smith. And
you remember, you wrote very personally as well in the book, David, about the last voyage of the gaff-rigged ketch Saint Austell, or Son Austell. As a small boy, I could recall seeing the burnt-out wreck of a gaff-rigged ketch close to the far side of Hookhead at Sandeel Bay. Again, I like the way, David, that you've worked in those little things regarding those matters.
Okay, yeah, that story, when I'd originally written that for Andrew Doherty's Water Harbour and Tides and Tales blog, so I was able to plagiarise my own writing. And funnily, we called it a schooner at that stage, but I was corrected subsequently. The vessel was not a schooner; it was a ketch. So in the lifeboat book, that has been corrected. But yeah, I had a great recollection of that trip to the Hook when I was a small boy. Because we lived like 3 miles from the Hook as the crow flies, but to reach it by car in those days, there was no car ferry. You just had the Patsy Barron's ferry at Passage, where you went across as a foot passenger. So to get to the Hook driving, you had to go all the way to New Ross. and across this famous bridge that had tar barrels to slow you down because it was so unsafe. So it was really a major undertaking to get to the Hook. And having visited the Hook, my father wanted to see this wreck, and I had visions that an old sailing ship lost shipwreck, would be something very romantic with sails flapping in the wind, and we just looked over this headland down onto Sandeel Bay, saw this big black shell. So it was really so disappointing for a small boy at the time. It's always stuck in my mind. And on Andrew's blog, there's a photograph that burnt out. We didn't put it in the book, but if anybody who likes to check out Andrew's blog for that story at the Saint Hostel, they'll see a follow up with the photograph of the burnt out shell of the vessel.
If I could add to that then as well, Damien, one of the things that David has very skillfully done in the book as well is given small insights into Dunmore as a village. And it's very, very interesting to see the change in the decades and all of that, and kind of patterns with the boats. So as David was talking about there, going around the headlands to where we now go across to the ferry, like you can see the change in all of that in the village and the area. So it's quite interesting from that point of view as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Brendan, you're 100% right on that. The boats effectively become the thread which links the decades as they go, and the families are part of that, and the ongoing community and all those things. But the actual vessels themselves and the names, and those names of boats, they live on and become synonymous then with crews over the years, don't they?
That's right, they do, yeah. You'd have had, the St. Patrick, the Waveney class lifeboat. You had Stephen Whittle and John Welsh and Walter Abrahamson, Kieran Mullan, all of those. And then in the Trent, you've Joffrey Murphy, Michael Griffin, Paulie Daniels, Ray Power. And further back then you go back and you have Paddy Billy Power, and I'm sure David would take up from there further back again, David.
My memory of started with Paddy Billy and then sort of ended with Stephen Whittle. Stephen became Cox in 1966. Paddy Billy retired, and Dick Murphy also. So there was a big changing of the guard that year, 1966. And Stephen was on the Annie Blanche Smith until 1970, and then there was 3 lifeboats came in the space of 5 years, which sort of a transition period, and until finally the St. Patrick came, and that was in Dunmore for 21 years until the Elizabeth and Ronald came. And now that's coming up for what, 25, would be 25 years next year. So new Shannon class lifeboat is due, and their lifespan is 50 years, so it'll be once in a lifetime. It's hard to believe a lifeboat will be there for 50 years. It'll be long after our time.
Neville, talk to me about the crack you have as well, and the fun and the camaraderie you have between crews, like personalities bouncing off each other as you bounce across the waves. There's great just sense of you're out there, you're working with somebody that is your brother, your sister, and you'll have rows and you'll have little foibles and whatever the case may be, but ultimately you're going to go to sea with them people, and you'll put your life at risk, and you'll do whatever has to be done.
Absolutely, yeah. You have to trust each other like a brother and sister, and that's what we are. As I mentioned earlier, we consider ourselves a little family, to be quite honest. And I suppose the best part about it is the slagging that goes on in the boat. I mean, historically you'll make a mistake somewhere, and you'll listen to it for the next 15 or 20 years, and you'll be slagged about it. And I think that's the part of it as well, and that brings us all together for the serious stuff and for the sad times, especially when the likes of tragedy hits and things get a bit messy and stuff. You need that bit of back up to each other, that friendship, that you can talk to each other. And one huge thing we have as well is we do a big debrief when we come back now from shouts, whether good, bad, or indifferent, and we all sit down and sometimes that can be turned into a bit of a slagging match as well, which is great, you know, and you know, everybody thinks they're perfect, come back in till their mistakes are pointed out in the debrief. But again, that's all a part of it, you know. We've an old saying down there, you leave your feelings at the door when you go to sea, you know.
Brendan, I'll let you come in there now and talk about that. Come on.
I'm very quiet down there. I tell you where I suppose that helps in a lot of ways is that when you're out there in a very long shout, it's cold, it's wet, it's bad seas and all of that, and the morale, if somebody that has great humour can bring the morale up in a situation like that, because people are people, they're human beings at the end of the day. You're wet, you're cold, you can get tired, you can get fed up, you're out there, you're trying your best, and it sometimes is not easy. Now, a lot of times it's very standard, straightforward, but when it is bad, it is bad. And someone having a sense of humour is something that can help the crew in ways like that. And there is banter at times with the lads and all of that. But everybody takes it in good stead, and you run with it, and you do this and you do that, and you try and improve.
So without naming any names, is there any particular incidents that stand out now if anybody was acting the Egypt, or being a bit of a dope?
What's that?
Is there any incidences of people acting the Egypt or being a bit stupid in what they were doing?
I'm sure I've been in that position many a time. So, and as the older version of things on the crew, I quietly take my medicine when it's given to me.
And all the young fellas are pretty fairly handy at giving it too.
David, as we know, the RNLI is a charity and volunteerism is at the core of it. And there was 66 businesses that helped out in making this book possible, which is phenomenal, isn't it? There were so many different people. We may not be able to thank them all, but in general, the work that was done, David, in making this book a reality really helped you in your 2 years. Like, you gave 2 years as well of your own free time on this. Fair play to you. That's fabulous, fabulous work. And that is just amazing, and well done to yourself. And you saw this maybe from what I get from the book, you saw this as a labor of love as well. And I get this feeling that you wanted to give back in your own way, some little small way, that if you can capture the essence of what is the RNLI, that is your contribution to their heroics.
Absolutely, Damien. You hit the nail on the head. I was privileged to be given the opportunity to write the book. I was absolutely delighted, and I've enjoyed the last 2 years immensely. It's been wonderful. I can't say I've met so many people, because with COVID in the last number of months, it's all been done socially distanced by email. But the number of people that I've come across and communicated with, and the generosity of them has been wonderful. And it really is, it's a tribute to the RNLI that we get so many people would be prepared to sponsor the book. And that's how we came to get such a wonderful, well-produced and absolutely lovely book, because of the money. And from here on in, all the sales now accrue to the RNLI, because the cost of the production have been more than covered. The RNLI itself has been very good to us. We have, here in Ireland, we have Niamh Stevenson, who is the media manager for Ireland. She's been a wonderful help to me and to Brendan and to Neville in getting this book to market. And she's given us the links to people at Poole in the UK, where the RNLI HQ is. And she arranged for Brendan and myself to visit the archives in Poole last February, and that was really a seminal moment in the book, because we knew at that stage we had something good to offer, and it was no longer just a sort of heritage project. This was going to be kind of a book that would raise funds for the RNLI in Dunmore. So we thank the RNLI very much, and particularly their CEO, who has endorsed the book and given us a lovely message of support, which I think is pretty unique, because it's not every lifeboat book that they would take such a deep interest in and give it their support. So we're truly grateful to them.
Yeah, I would hazard that this book, and Mark Dowie does a lovely introduction in it, it will set the template for other RNLI stations across Britain and Ireland. And with that, Neville, the idea that every cent, every sale, every penny sold from this book, because of the sponsorship that has been spoken about, and Brendan said this at the start as well, it means that everything is going to go towards the RNLI and the continuing operations. And that's so important for you, because it brings us also to those that collect money for you. You mentioned the different people behind the scenes that make the tea and all that sort of stuff, but those that go out and shake the tins when tins can be shaken. It just means so much, doesn't it?
It really does, and especially in obviously we're all conscious of COVID times and the whole lot, and the RNLI as a charity is suffering. There's no doubt about it, as I'd imagine every other charity in the country is. So we have to find various ways to try and raise money. And I mean, this book couldn't have been more timely, to be quite honest, to come in and take up the slack and where we've been deficient. And it's absolutely fantastic. And the fact that we've so many sponsors involved means that every cent of the book is going to the RNLI. And I mean, the money goes into our boats, it goes into our training, and I suppose more importantly, our safety equipment, the gear that we wear every day, our famous yellow wellies, our helmets, our all-weather gear, the stuff that keeps us safe and comfortable when we're at sea for long times in cold and wet weather. We have the fundraising branch. They're fantastic. You know, they're our backbone of the station, and they do all the fundraising mainly. They're the same people who put on the kettle when we're along shouting the sandwiches are ready when we get back to the station. You know, they're always there for us. They're like, you know, our family at home as well in the station. It's great to have. You need that.
Yeah. And there's a limited edition of 1,400 copies. It's a hardback. And again, all the sponsors are mentioned on the back of the book, Brendan. Special mention as well, and the thank you was the family of the late Liam Fitzgerald, who enabled the publication to be printed in this beautifully designed hardback cover. And Brendan, you mentioned it earlier, the fact that this history comes together and it's told, and that's so important that these stories are told.
Yeah.
Because it takes me to another aspect. A lot of the people that serve on lifeboat crews, because they're normal people doing extraordinary things, as David says, they don't look for publicity. Like, no, you're good to be coming here talking about this, and Neville does it as well. But there's others. There's a certain coxswain at the moment. I would have tried to talk to him recently. And, no, I'm not into that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because all he wants to do is go out and do his job. And others are good at saying the few words as well. And everybody has their place. But these are ordinary people doing ordinary stuff.
That's correct. Yeah.
Extraordinary stuff.
And like, we wouldn't be my normal situation either, sitting on a program like this. But it's important that the book is brought to the public and that the history is recorded. And as you say, people wouldn't necessarily, once they go on the shouts and they train and all of that, that's it. They don't go beyond that. They see that as being the important element of what they're doing. And that's why this book highlights those people over the time of the boats. And as you said, there's been many people over a long history that would have been in exactly the same situation. We may not know all their names or whatever, but they were there. And when we go back at the records, we looking at the families you mentioned there, the late Liam Fitzgerald, going back through the Burkes and so forth. William Burke would have been a coxswain, and he was also on in terms of the rescue of the Mexico. So the families have long connections going back, and it was a very generous of the Fitzgerald family in terms of supporting the book, that the cover would be hardback, which for us was a major thing because we came from a very, very, very small base. And I remember when I would proofread some work for David, and David, we got to the point where the book was ready, and David and myself were looking as to how we progress. And I can tell you that I had a knot in my stomach as to how we were going to fundraise. And but David said to me, I'm determined to have this book written. And I answered back, and I too am determined to see it written, or to see it published. And it went forward from there.
Yeah, ultimately, any book, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, David, it's about telling a story. And within that, there's characters. And the people that serve on the lifeboat, they don't see themselves as characters, as you say. They don't see themselves as being part of a narrative. They're just doing their job. This is what they feel it's about. But there's lovely vignettes into the likes of Bulligan Power, and there's pictures there from the Annie Blanche Smith, John Dunn, Morris Power, John Rocky Power, John Bulligan, Dick Murphy, Billy Power, John Power Jr. There's a lot of powers in Dunmore, as we know. And then the little mention of Liam Clancy in May 1997. He recited a poem written by John. That was the naming ceremony of the Elizabeth and Ronald, and he sadly died 3 months later. So, can I ask you, David, what do you think the essence of this book is?
The essence of the book is, and again, I hate repeating myself, but it's ordinary people doing extraordinary things. These are all people from Dunmore, came from Dunmore. Their families still live there, from the people that have passed away. So it's a book about Dunmore. That's really the essence of it. And we've profiled 30 near the back of the book. We've profiled 13 very diverse people from all sorts of backgrounds, which just shows you the extent of what the RNLI family is, from the gentry to the ordinary fishermen, and they're all played a part, different parts, different roles, but they were all part of the RNLI family. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, before I come back to you with it, if there's any little mentions you want to mention of thank yous, Neville, it's not just people from Dunmore, and this is why the RNLI is so unique as well. It embraces and it welcomes in those from outside. As you say, you're from Cork, I'm from Wicklow, and other people that be different people that come to Dunmore. And Dunmore has a lovely feeling. There's so many different people in Dunmore from different parts of the country and different countries. And the RNLI, it's kind of worked as a binding force. This book, Neville, from your perspective, it really captures that essence that David is talking about, doesn't it?
It really does. It captures the whole community part of it. And when I joined the lifeboat here, it was like, you know, a step into the community. You're kind of brought in, and you have the social aspect of it as well. And obviously the people that we're going out to and we're looking for and bringing back are people of our own community, and that's very, very important as well. And, you know, it's all about volunteering, and I think people who will give up their time, jump out of their bed at 3 o'clock in the morning when everybody else is tucked up nice and warm, and go out into a freezing cold night in the middle of winter. I think first of all they're probably half mad, which is good enough as well. But it's a certain character, it's a certain type of person will do that, and it's fantastic. And that is really, I think, brought out in the book. And I think the fact of the committee that came together, the sponsorship that was donated, the fact that how the whole publishing it was done, I think, by everybody just literally coming together. And I think that kind of typifies what we do as lifeboat crew. We all come together and we get a job done, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%. Brendan, why do you do it?
Good question. As I said earlier on when we were talking, it was always part of growing up that it was there. You saw what was there, and you saw that if you wanted to look and say what's the best thing you did in your life, and you look back, you picked that. But to start forward, it's just part of normal life. I think Frances alluded to in one of her comments as well that it was probably one of the best things she did in her life. And I would have to say the same thing in terms of the personal view of doing it. But you set out to contribute, you set out to be part of it. You're saving people's lives and all of that. There's a myriad of reasons. But the primary thing is that, for me anyway, it was always that you grew into it. It was part and parcel of what was there and what you were. And you know, you don't think too much about it. You just do it, and that's the whole thing. There's no great reason to put there other than it's what you want to do as best you can with people. Like we've been saying, you were asking there about people and crews and all of that. we've always been very fortunate in Dunmore with the great coxswains that have been in the boat. You take from the present Roy Abrahamson, son of Walter Abrahamson, Jophie Murphy, Paulie Daniels, Ray Power, John Welsh, Kieran Malone, Stephen Whittle, Paddy Billy Power. You could go on and on, Madigan's, all the way back, right back to the original man, John Salter. And I'm sure if you ask them the question, why do you do it? You know, you'd give a myriad of answers, but at the same time, it's part of what they are. There's no reason not to do it. And when you see that you've contributed to saving someone's life, you're part of a team that's saving someone's life, but you have contributed something that's tangible and it's real. So, you know, it goes on from there, Damien. It's
yeah. No, beautifully put, because there's no greater maybe feat for anybody to do than to save somebody else's life, and doctors and nurses do that as well, and you can
exactly
do it.
Yeah.
And it is amazing. And also what comes out in the book, and it comes out in anybody's experiences from yourselves, but also outsiders and others that talk and know lifeboat men and crews, there's no egos involved. Neville, there's no ego. That's so important, isn't it, Brendan?
It is, yeah, it is important, because you're a part of a team. I mean, in recent years, in the last 12, 15 years, you would have had a whole training program developed reflecting the change in societies and so forth. Where when I was growing up, Dunmore, as you could say, was a real fishing village. There was completely herring in the winter. People went to sea. They worked and lived on the herring. All of that, and then the transition through to tourism and coupled with fishing, and now you're the development that the village is growing and all of that. So you see all these things passing through, but at the same constant is the lifeboat. The sea is the other constant, and the people who engage with the sea, and the whole training of crews has changed, but the ethos is the same. When you went back to the boats where they wouldn't have a training program, but there were fishermen who were always on the sea at the time. And now you've got a very detailed training program for people who are coming in, reflecting society's change, that there's not as many fishing anymore. And you need to train people to adapt to that and become competent crew and work within the team.
And Neville, finally, it was a courageous thing to do for all of you to put this together as a book, because it could have ended up being 5 or 6 different volumes, and it worked out great. And again, limited edition, DVF printer, local Waterford company, Bill Deavy being involved, and many others, and it's just great. So before I come back to David, finally, Neville, you just want to thank everybody as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from our point of view in the lifeboat and being a volunteer life group myself, I really like to thank David for doing this in the first place. I mean, he's volunteered his time and given that up. It's absolutely amazing. And the committee that has come together to publish the book, and I think in particular the 66 odd business and individuals that have sponsored and made it. Now there is a sponsor list in the book, so they are in the book, that list. So it's right. I suppose recognition of our own crew is very, very important as well. We've currently 19 volunteers. And that's not including the operations team who are the background of the station as well. We have Tony Kelly there, who's the operations manager, and we've deputy launch authorities and stuff like that in the background. So they're key as well to any station. So it's important to recognise these. And I think this book is just amazing. It is going to be our legacy. It is. I mean, we've learned from the past. We've learned from all these coxswains, crews that went out in these seas before in different equipment and different boats, and we're learning from them every day, and that's what brings our technology forward and makes our life a little bit easier on the sea.
It's very accessible, David. You're honoured, as you say, and delighted to be part of this project, and you've done a fabulous job. It's very accessible. It's a book that you can dip into quite easily as well. So I'll leave the final word with you, David, as the author.
Okay, thank you, Damien. Yeah, I've been, as I say, delighted to have been involved and given this opportunity to put something into the RNLI. I mean, I admire people like Neville and Brendan who get up in the middle of the night, go out to sea in all sorts of weather. For me, sitting at home at a laptop with a nice, comfortable room is a long way from what they do. So I was delighted to have some small part in it. And I thank Brendan for giving me that opportunity just over 2 years ago. And one person I'd like to mention played a big part in shaping the book, and that is Dr. Pat McCarthy, who is a Waterford writer, but he lives in Sandymount in Dublin. And he was really helpful because Pat is an experienced writer on historical books, and he was able to guide me and put me, helped me enormously when the book was starting off. So I'm very grateful to Pat, along with a number of other people. I mean, the generosity of people and the goodwill, people from like Brendan Power in Feathered was a great source of help, and Liam Ryan, another person from Feathered. The help they gave and the support was really tremendous, and thank them all, and thank all the people that have bought the book, had pre-ordered it, because that is really wonderful, and I hope they all enjoy it immensely as much as I did writing the book for them.
Super, well said. Finally, Brendan, how do we get the book? And before we're going to play, and again, Phil Coulter allowed the Home from the Sea lyrics to be printed. We're going to hear the Lifeboat song in a minute. How does one order or get the book?
Primarily, we have our website, www.dunmorelifeboatbook.com. Now, people can go on there and they can order directly from that. Coupled with that, we have been very kindly offered from the shops in the village of Dunmore that they will take books and have them available for the public. Likewise, in Cheap Pint and in Passage, and the book centre in Waterford will also be promoting the book. So they're the primary areas, and we're trying to give as much coverage as possible for people in the locality to be able to obtain the book, because as I mentioned at the very start, there's nearly possibly over 700 books now committed out of a total of 1,400. And that's a great testament to a book that's in the process of being printed. So those there again, www.dunmorelifeboatbook.com, the local shops in the village and in Passage and in Cheap Pint, and from the committee or anybody in relation to the committee also.
Okay. Stay with us, gentlemen, because we're going to have a little listen now to Home from the Sea, and in a minute we're going to be talking to or hearing from Tony Kelly, as Neville said, the Dunmore East Lifeboat Operations Manager. Here is Home from the Sea by Phil Coulter.
On a cold winter's night, with a storm at its height, a lifeboat answered the call. They pitched and they tossed till we thought they were lost, as we watched from the harbour wall. Though the night was pitch black, there was no turning back, for someone was waiting out there. But each volunteer had to live with his fear as they joined in a silent prayer. Carry us home, oh, home from the sea. Angels of mercy, answer our plea, and carry us home, home, home from the sea. Carry us safely home from the sea. As they battle their way past the mouth of the bay, it was blowing like never before. As they gallantly fought Every one of them thought of loved ones back on the shore. Then a flicker of light, and they knew they were right. There she was, on the crest of a wave. She's an old fishing boat, and she's barely afloat. Please God, there are souls we can save and carry them home, home, home from the sea. Angels of mercy, answer our plea and carry us home, home, home from the sea. Carry us safely home from the sea. And back in the town, in a street that runs down to the sea and the harbour wall, they had gathered in pairs at the foot of the stairs to wait for the radio call. And just before dawn, when all hope was gone, came a hush and a faraway sound. 'Twas the coxswain, he roared, all survivors on board, thank God, and we're homeward bound to carry them home, home, home from the sea. Angels of mercy, answer our plea.
A poignant, emotional and haunting song. Joining us now is Lifeboat Operations Manager Tony Kelly. Tony, over to you.
Hi, Damien. Hi, everybody. I'm just so proud to be part of this magnificent project, and I'll keep it brief, but I'd like to just say our thanks on behalf of Dunmaree's Lifeboats and the operations and all the crew and the fundraising committee, to David Carroll especially, and to Brendan for producing this magnificent book. It's absolutely outstanding, and it's been an absolute privilege to be part of it. Also with Bill Deavy and Deavy Fulfilment for their absolute fantastic production and creating what is, to me, the social history of Dunmore and the history of the lifeboats throughout the ages. It's a remarkable achievement, especially in these times with the COVID crisis. Fundraising has been very, very difficult, and we've had to come up with various ways of trying to keep the fundraising going, to keep the lifeboat operational. And for David to present this opportunity to us is just remarkable. And from all of us in Dunmaree's Darnell, I'd just like to extend a heartfelt thank you very much. And that's pretty much it, Damien. Just to thank him for his efforts on a remarkable book, showing the awareness of what it is that these remarkable people do. And I'm just proud to be part of them.
Tony, thank you very much for that. Very, very well said. Thanks very much. And thanks for joining us tonight, and the very, very best of luck of sales. I'm going to take a few questions now that have come in from our listeners and viewers over the past hour and 10 minutes. A question for you, David, first. The photo of a U-boat in the harbour was hugely surprising. Could you elaborate on this discovery, please?
Okay, thank you, Damien. If some viewers may recall, others may not be aware, but in 2017, it was 100 years from the time of the rescue of the U-boat Captain Tebelio Hans, and that was carried out by 3 local young fishermen. One of them was Jack McGrath and the 2 Power brothers, and we have that is in the book. But in 2017, there was a centenary celebration, and it was a wonderful occasion. It was curated by the Barony of Galtier Historical Society, and they put together a wonderful exhibition in St Andrew's Church, and they had gathered all these photographs, so they were available. So when I went to research that story and gather photographs, I was able to call on our good friends in the Barony of Galtier Historical Society, and they very kindly allowed me use their photographs. So they had got them for that occasion 3 years ago. They may have come from archives in Kew in London. I'm not terribly certain the original origin, but they were very kind to pass them on to us for the book. So if the maybe the questioner might like, further information, we may be able to give it to them later off camera.
Lovely. That's excellent, David. Thank you very much for that. A question for Brendan. How much has the equipment, the safety standards changed in the 36 years that you have been on the crew, Brendan?
I suppose if you look at it in the modern sense, we have the training systems that are there now. But going back to all the time, one thing that was always there was that every coxswain that took a crew to sea, paramount in their mind would be the safety of the crew and how the crew worked together. So there was always an element in terms of safety. Naturally, like all areas of the modern world, that technology and systems have changed radically in the last number of years in particular. And so we've got a very detailed training system which covers a lot of the aspects of the safety at sea, which is seriously important for a crew, particularly in difficult weather conditions. And the crew train under that system, and it's certified and so forth, and procedures are followed on board, etc., and continuous upgrade of training. Likewise, with the technology that we have, it's always in development, and people take good cognizance of that. So it's an ongoing process. It has changed in its delivery, but in terms of awareness and all of that, people would have always been aware of safety on the boat, and people working together to ensure safety on the boat.
Very well answered. Thank you very much. 2 questions combined into one for you, Neville. A practical question, I suppose. Anybody watching this tonight in terms of wanting to buy a book for themselves or for a relative, how can they get the book? When will they receive it, for example? And are there deliveries outside of Ireland?
Yeah, well, we've several different ways of getting the book to you, I suppose. It's in print at the moment as we speak. DVF are publishing it at the moment, so we hope to have it in the week starting the 7th of December is the plan at the moment. So once we get our hands on them, we will be able to ship them, and absolutely anywhere around the world. I suppose we can't guarantee that we're going to get to you before Christmas if you are that far away, but we will do our utmost for you. But what we can say is we'll be on the way, and it'll get to you at some point, and it'll be worth waiting for. Locally then, we're going to have it in all of the shops in Dunmore East, and we're going to have it down in Passage East as well, in the shops in there. And of course, online is our main one for the deliveries, and that's in DunmoreLifeboatBook.com, and just click online and it'll get delivered to your door, or we can also arrange for pickups. And through the online system, you'll get emails and updates. So anybody worried about where they're going to collect it or how it's going to get to them, don't worry, we'll get back to you. We'll in the loop with emails, so we'll update you as often. So,
and to add to that as well, that I suppose Ireland's one of Ireland's most famous bookshops, the Book Centre in Waterford, will also have the book available. And again, as Neville mentioned, the production of the book from DBF Design and Print was absolutely excellent in terms of how they produced such a well-designed book.
Very good. And obviously, hopefully next week when things are relaxed a little bit, people can go in and browse, because obviously it's not possible to browse at the minute in the book centre, but you will be hopefully able to do that next week. Very simple question for you, David. You've written so extensively about Dunmore and Dunmore East Lifeboat. What's your earliest memory of the lifeboat in Dunmore? That's in from a viewer.
Okay, well, I grew up, I can just remember the lifeboat from day one. It was moored in the middle of the harbour, and there was no pontoon. And the crew had to row out in a big, heavy rowing boat to reach it. And the mechanic at the time was Dick Murphy, and Dick had his own rowing boat, or a punt as we called it, a smaller one. And he rowed every morning from near where the island was. For people who can remember that back, a lot of rowing boats were kept near the island part of the harbour. And Dick rowed. Well, he didn't actually row, he sculled, now, which was interesting because that was just with one oar over the stern. And he went out every day and he went on board and maintained the two engines and kept them in pristine condition. I was often rowing past and he'd let me climb up on board. I'm sure Mr. Arthur Westcott Pitt wouldn't have been too pleased if he'd known, but Dick would invite me on board and I'd watch him working away. I just remember a lovely smell and all the brass shining, and it was wonderful because when you went onto a fishing boat and went to look at the engine, it was always a horrible smell of bilge water and a fishy kind of smell, but the lifeboat was gleaming. And another memory I had, now it's not an early one, was when in my teenage years, Mr. Arthur Westcott Pitt one Sunday afternoon and said if I'd like to go on with the lifeboat. They were going to Slade for the regatta. It was one of the kind of promotional visits. It would have been a flag day, and the lifeboat would have been there to stand by with different races and events going on. And there was also the Enterprise dinghies from Dunmore sailed over to have a race, so it escorted them over and back. But arriving back in Dunmore, it was 1962. And going ashore and walking up to the village near the hall, and the news everybody had, it was Marilyn Monroe had died. So I always associate Marilyn Monroe with the Dunmore East Lifeboat. Not many people. I
think I feel a name of the next boat coming on board there, lads. Best of luck with that. In terms of being out and about, thank you very much for that, David. The people would have seen the recent, obviously, communications and the rough seas and the rescue and the cooperation between Dunmore, Kilmore and Rosslare. Brendan, how do crews, a very simple question from a viewer, how do you communicate when you're out on a shout like that? And obviously communicate with onshore as well. Talk to me about communication systems, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Well, generally, it's a good question because you're working in different sea conditions. Obviously, when it's calm, it's an easy thing in terms of communication between each other. When the sea conditions are such, and particularly at night, are horrendous gale, the communication can be that bit more difficult. So the coxswains on the bridge and the crew on deck, etc., maybe setting up a tow. So you may have to have an intermediary between the coxswain and, depending on, it's very rare, but it has happened. In terms of the boat itself, we like to land ship to shore, VHF, etc., and we'd have various systems on board in terms of from the boat to the shore communication as such. But good communication on the boat is essential, and it really comes about from a crew training together and understanding how they operate in different positions on the boat, because you don't necessarily be doing the same job every time you go out. You could be moving around to different aspects of what is required, setting up a tour on navigation or helping somebody or whatever. So working together generally and good communication really stems from how people train together and that they do train together. And it goes from that really, but it depends again on the sea conditions that you're really in, and it can be difficult sometimes, but it's done. It works.
It works, yeah. I might bring you in briefly on that as well, Neville, and just combine that as well with, I suppose, lifeboats when they go for repair. Somebody's texted in about the Elizabeth and Ronald having to go for repairs in her return home.
Yeah, there was a particular unusual event, to be honest. It got damaged down the harbour one evening, and that was probably one of the strangest, I suppose, non-shows that I was ever called of. The bleeper went, and I ran down to the lifeboat, and the lifeboat was practically on its side after being damaged in the harbour. You know, I suppose as crew, and in particular, I'd imagine Roy Abrahamson, he's a coxswain mechanic below. You know, it's his baby. He keeps the engines right. He keeps her shining. And to be honest, that side it could only be described as heartbreaking, because that's our lifeboat. The Elizabeth and Ronald is the one that I've always only known here personally, and you do get attached to it, you know. And even when the relief boats come in, they're a different beast, you know, and nothing like our own Elizabeth and Ronald. She's our girl, and it went away, and it was away for I think nearly 12 or 14 months. But what really, I suppose, brought everything home to me was the community gathered together for the boat's return. When we had a relief lifeboat alongside here for that period, and you know, the evening that our lifeboat came back, she was escorted in, she was escorted out, but when she came back, there was a crowd on the breakwater down there, and the whole high wall in Dunmurry celebrating Elizabeth and Ronald come back. And it's not just ourselves, it's the whole community that appreciated it. And there's some beautiful footage and beautiful photographs in the book of the homecoming as well. And it's just, you know, it was like our girl coming home, and a very, very special moment.
That brings me nicely to the conclusion of the evening, gentlemen. I'm going to ask you in around 20 or 30 seconds. David, I'll start with you. What does the lifeboat mean to you? What does this book and chronicling the lifeboat and the stories of that, what does it mean to you?
It means an awful lot, and Brendan probably could answer this question better than I could, because he was very much afraid that the history of the lifeboat could be lost very quickly as the village developed with new people coming and so forth. That very quickly the memory could, and it was very important to get it down in writing. I was glad to be able to do that and make a small contribution to the village that I grew up in, and one that I love to this very day.
And Brendan, that ties in again with the idea of going out on a rescue mission and coming back and saying, a job well done. This book and this publication is a job well done.
Certainly, it's a fantastic book in terms of that it places on record the people that went before us, what they did, the efforts they made, and you know, the sheer effort that they made over 106 years longer, in terms of the lifeboat in the village, which is an essential part of the whole maritime side of the village, and in terms of the fishing community, leisure facilities, all of that, in terms of there is a facility there that can go out and actually save people. But the book itself has recorded all of that, a lot of the stories, and there's many more stories. There's, as David said earlier, you could fill volumes of stories in terms of the rescues and the characters and the people and all of what was done. So again, it puts on record all of that going back, and for people who have been living in the village all their lives, it's nice for them to see that what they saw growing up is there to read and look at the photographs, and it'll bring a lot of memories back to a lot of people. And for people who are moving into the village, it gives them an understanding of a sense of place that they can identify with and be participative of, and contribute as well in the future. So it has all those aspects and many, many more.
And Neville, we're all on a journey, and a journey through life, and this book is a journey through the history, the generations past, and will also be a guide to the generations to come of the history and the lineage of each time the lifeboat goes out, whether you be training or whether you be going on an actual mission, the journey that you're on. It's a wonderful, wonderful project.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a very special journey for each individual, and that are lucky enough to get on this journey in the lifeboat itself, as I would say, from crew. You know, we spoke about courage earlier. I think it's very important that the courage, and in particular passion of all crew, past and present, and certainly this book going forward, I think will be something for, will potentially attract new crew, attract the next generation of crew, and we can all learn from that, and that will build its own passion in the future. I think that's the real important thing here, that we have to look past to learn and move forward, and highlighting the volunteerism, the fantastic work that has been done in this very station, in this very lifeboat, in this very village for the past couple of centuries, and just to keep it going, and people that are in it love it, and they get to tell their story in the future.
Wonderfully put. Gentlemen, Neville Murphy, to everybody involved in the lifeboat, Brendan, thank you so much. David Carroll, for your marvellous work. All three of you for your contributions tonight, gentlemen. It's been a very interesting and entertaining evening and a very good presentation. I want to thank Ian Dunn and James for doing the admin work behind the scenes to make tonight's possible. I want to thank Tony Kelly and everybody involved in the RNLI in Dunmore and beyond. Anybody watching and listening abroad as well in particular, hello to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. You know how the book is and where it is and how it's available. If you have any problems, contact the lads through Facebook or any crew member or through the shops. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Take care, folks, and stay safe. All the best.
Thank you, Liam.